in a room where the only sound was the methodical ticking of an ancient clock hanging on the wall. An air of uneasy quiet lingered. Sitting opposite me was John, my husband of nearly 3 decades, his attention firmly fixed on the television, seemingly oblivious to my existence. Engulfed in my own thoughts, I felt the heavy burden of countless grievances and pent-up frustration that had accumulated over the years, reaching a boiling point. "Have you finished moving?" John's voice, dripping with his typical disdain, cut through the silence. Without giving him the satisfaction of eye contact, I responded with a steadiness in my voice that belied the tumultuous storm brewing within me. "I'm leaving, John." His scoff was predictable. "Oh, really? And where do you think you'll go, Stella? You can't make it on your own without me." His words were meant to wound, but instead they ignited a stronger determination within me. For too long, I had tolerated his indifference and his mother's relentless interference. It was time to take back control of my life. "I'll figure it out," I asserted, rising to my feet, feeling a surge of empowerment despite the daunting uncertainty that lay before me. His mother, who had taken up residence with us over the past year, entered the room, her eyes narrowing at the sight of my packed bags. "Running away, are we?" she mocked, convinced of my inability to stand up to the challenges of their family dynamics. Ignoring her taunts, I seized my bags and made my way to the door. John remained seated, passively declaring, "You'll be back. You need us." Crossing the threshold of the house, a wave of liberation washed over me. The cool evening air caressed my face, offering relief to my once stifled spirit. Unsure of my destination, for the first time in years, I was touched by a flicker of hope. For 28 years, I had fulfilled the role of the compliant wife to John, a man who regarded me more as a convenience than a partner. Our son Elias was the sole beacon of joy in my life, yet even he could not bridge the expanding chasm in my heart. The presence of John's mother, with her endless critiques and manipulation, only exacerbated the toxic atmosphere of our home. I found solace in a modest yet serene apartment that became my haven. It was a place for me to breathe freely and contemplate without being subjected to judgment. In the days that followed, I chose to ignore the flurry of calls and messages from John and his mother, which oscillated between entreaties and threats. My resolve was unwavering. I had closed my ears to their pleas. My colleagues at the library, where I had been employed for years, stood by me. They had observed the gradual dimming of my spirit over time and now bore witness to my resurgence. In that quiet, supportive environment, amidst books and understanding friends, I began to rediscover myself and nurture a newfound hope for the future. As I was adjusting to my new lifestyle, a call from my son Elias interrupted the silence. His voice carried a weight of worry as he asked, "Mom, are you all right?" I responded with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. "Yes, Elias. I'm doing better than I've ever done." His next words revealed a family in distress. My decision hadn't sat well with them. My husband had resorted to drinking, and my mother-in-law couldn't stop accusing me of abandonment. The guilt tried to creep in, but I brushed it aside, knowing they had to learn to respect my choices. Elias paused before admitting he was happy to see me prioritizing my well-being, offering his support whenever I needed it. Ending the call, I was struck by the realization that this was merely the start of proving myself to John and his mother, who had long underestimated me. It was time they understood I was no longer the compliant woman they presumed to control. My path of self-discovery and asserting my independence was just beginning. In the quiet of my modest new home, I pondered over the 28 years spent with John. What began as a hopeful union gradually deteriorated, revealing a marriage far from what it could have been. Initially, John's charm and our shared dreams made everything seem perfect. However, as time passed, his attention shifted more towards his needs, neglecting the family. The birth of Elias, rather than uniting us, only magnified our growing apart. John believed providing financially was enough, leaving the emotional support to me. Ariana, John's mother, was always a shadow in our lives, her constant criticism of my parenting wearing me down. "You're spoiling him," she would say, claiming John never needed such pampering. Despite her remarks, I dedicated myself to raising Elias, who grew into a considerate and self-reliant man, a beacon of light amidst our home's growing tension. The final straw came when Ariana moved in without my consent, claiming loneliness. Her presence was overbearing, critiquing everything from my culinary skills to my choice of clothing, implying John could have chosen a better partner. This new chapter in my life was about breaking free from years of control and rediscovery, a journey I was only just embarking on. Frequently, Ariana's criticisms would reach my ears, but what truly shattered my resolve was uncovering John's deceit. I accidentally came across bank statements one day, which laid bare significant sums being drawn from our shared account. This money was squandered on Ariana's gambling addiction and John's covert pleasures. Any attempt to address these issues led to intense disputes, with John invariably taking his mother's side. "She's my mother, Stella. She needs this," he would claim, brushing aside my apprehensions. The tipping point arrived when I accidentally overheard them scheming to seize complete control over our finances, aiming to demote me to a mere bystander in my own home. It was then I realized I could no longer tolerate living under their dominance. On the day I decided to leave, I vowed to make them realize the agony they had inflicted. My strategy was straightforward but potent, to dent their egos and their wallets. I began by legally dissociating our financial ties, a move that astounded John. "What are you thinking?" he demanded over the phone. "I'm safeguarding myself. Something long overdue," I responded, my tone serene yet resolved. Ariana's reaction was even more exaggerated. "You ingrate after all we've done for you," she shrieked upon discovering. Yet I remained undeterred. The era of my subservience had ended. I was now setting my own rules, marking the start of their retribution. The initial phase following my financial liberation was chaotic. John and Ariana, outraged, revealed their true selves through their fury. Their attempts to intimidate me through endless, increasingly hostile phone calls were futile. "You think you're clever, Stella?" John sneered in one conversation. "You're nothing without me. You'll beg to return." "I won't, John. I refuse to be manipulated any longer," I retorted, my resolve reinforcing my stance. Ariana's threats were more venomous. "You'll regret this, Stella. You've destroyed our family." "There was no family to destroy, Ariana. It was all a facade," I countered. Despite their intimidation, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The dread that once governed me had vanished, supplanted by a firm determination for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I began my journey of vindication by connecting with old friends and acquaintances, openly sharing the saga of deceit and manipulation orchestrated by John and Ariana. My candid revelations quickly disseminated, casting a shadow over their previously unblemished reputations. John, who had always held his social status in high regard, was mortified. "How could you expose me like this?" he confronted me, disbelief in his tone. "You exposed yourself," I responded with a composed demeanor. "I'm merely bringing the truth to light." Ariana, too, found herself ensnared by the disapproval of the community. "You've made us pariahs," she accused, seeing it as an act of war. But the fear she once instilled in me had evaporated. "No, Ariana, this is not war, it's accountability," I countered. Watching their social circles crumble was a testament to the efficacy of truth. John's allies withdrew, cautious of his now blemished reputation, while Ariana's influence waned as her gambling addiction and manipulative tactics became public knowledge. Yet my pursuit of justice didn't end with tarnishing their social image. I recognized their financial vulnerabilities as their Achilles heel. Through diligent legal counsel, I initiated a claim for my rightful portion of our joint assets, ensuring Ariana's gambling liabilities and John's financial mismanagement were thoroughly scrutinized. The courtroom battles were arduous, yet my resolve never wavered. Their fabrications and defamations were effortlessly dismantled by the solid foundation of truth, culminating in a legal triumph that favored me significantly. As the judge's decision was announced, the defeat in John and Ariana's eyes was palpable. This victory transcended mere financial gains. It was a declaration of moral superiority. "You've ruined us, Stella," John lamented, a mere shadow of his once pompous self. "No, John, you dismantled our family long before." "I'm merely salvaging what's left," I retorted, exiting the courtroom feeling liberated for the first time in years. The anticipation of a future unchained from the shadows of my past filled me with hope. In the aftermath of the court's verdict, I embarked on the task of reconstructing my life with the assets rightfully mine, stepping out from under John and Ariana's dark cloud. Their responses oscillated between shock and denial, unable to fathom the magnitude of their downfall. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one of autonomy and self-discovery, ready to embrace the unknown with open arms. The disintegration of John and Ariana's facade was merely the initial stride towards reclaiming my identity and pursuing a life of genuine happiness and freedom. In an outburst of desperation, John voiced his indignation over the phone one evening. "You can't simply overturn our lives, Stella," he protested, his tone rife with desperation. "I'm merely reclaiming what rightfully belongs to me," I asserted, unyielding. "Perhaps you should have considered the repercussions of your actions before betraying my trust." Ariana, on the other hand, resorted to more surreptitious tactics. She attempted to turn family members against me, casting herself as the aggrieved party. However, her efforts were in vain. "Stella, you're ripping our family apart," she charged when we unexpectedly crossed paths at the grocery store. "This family was fragmented long before I made my departure," I responded, denying her the gratification of witnessing any distress on my part. Embracing my newfound autonomy, I relished in the liberty of dictating my own life. I severed their direct access to me by changing my phone number and found solace in dedicating my time to a local shelter, aiding those who had encountered similar tribulations. Yet my pursuit of justice was far from concluded. I discovered Ariana's intentions to challenge the court's verdict, clinging to the futile hope of recovering funds for her gambling dependencies. "You won't succeed, Stella. I'll ensure your downfall," she menaced through a message conveyed by a relative. In defiance, I bolstered my legal defenses, ready to rebut any challenge she dared to present. The person who once avoided confrontation had evolved into a resolute champion of her own rights. John, meanwhile, was succumbing to the mounting pressure. His once unblemished reputation now lay in ruins, adversely affecting his career. The allies and connections he once prized were now retracting, hesitant to align themselves with a figure ensnared in scandal. "You've obliterated my existence, Stella," he confessed in a moment of introspection. "You've orchestrated your own demise, John." "My actions have merely unveiled the reality," I retorted. As days melded into months, I observed the unraveling of their ostensibly secure lives. Ariana's bid to overturn the court's judgment floundered, leaving her both financially and socially destitute. John's professional life persisted in its decline, his standing irreversibly compromised. Yet witnessing their decline evoked no sense of triumph within me. Their downfall, though a vital phase in my journey of self-reclamation, was not a source of satisfaction. The path I had embarked upon was about healing and rediscovery, far beyond the confines of their retribution. Regaining my independence and self-respect was a monumental step, yet the scars of neglect and emotional torment were still healing. As I navigated the path of rebuilding my life, my primary goal was to cultivate inner peace and happiness. The journey I embarked on was transformative, leading me out of the darkness that had enveloped my past. I had become stronger, more resilient. My narrative wasn't about seeking vengeance, but about liberation, a celebration of the human spirit's capacity to overcome hardship. Months had passed since the court had ruled in my favor, yet the impact of those events continued to resonate. John and Ariana, now distanced from their social circles, were mere shadows of who they once were. During an unanticipated visit, Elias, my son, brought distressing news. His demeanor was weighed down with concern as he relayed the grim state of his father and grandmother. "Dad's been fired, and his drinking has worsened. Grandma has gambled away everything. They're selling the house," he shared, the weight of his words heavy in the air. My heart went out to Elias, despite the distance. The ties of family pulled at my emotions. Did we push too hard? Elias wondered aloud, his voice a mere whisper. In response, I assured him, albeit with a heavy heart, that we had stood on the side of justice. They had chosen their paths. The downfall of John and Ariana wasn't a source of satisfaction for me. Rather, it served as a somber lesson on the importance of living a life marked by integrity and respect for others. In the weeks that followed, whispers and rumors about the sale of John and Ariana's house circulated, marking the culmination of their decline. Attempts by John to secure employment were thwarted by his tarnished reputation, while Ariana found herself ostracized, her addiction no longer a secret. On an evening walk, I encountered John, a man who had lost much of his former self. We faced each other in silence, a stark reflection of the distance and transformation that had occurred. There's nothing to say. He finally broke the silence, his voice laced with defeat. This encounter, though brief, was poignant. It underscored the profound shifts in our lives, the consequences of choices made, and the paths diverged. My journey was not one of retribution, but of forging a new beginning, grounded in self-respect and the pursuit of genuine contentment. Cutting him off, I made it clear you chose your own path. He acknowledged this with a slow nod, a look of resignation in his eyes. I never imagined things would end up this way, he whispered. As I walked away from John, a sense of finality enveloped me. The man who had once exerted such control over my life had become merely a stranger marked by his own downfall. Ariana, too, disappeared into the background, her vibrant presence now dimmed by the weight of her choices. This marked the end of a tumultuous chapter with John and Ariana, leading me to a profound realization. My fight was not for revenge, but for reclaiming my life and peace. Standing up to those who had oppressed me was a matter of justice and self-respect, not retribution. This ordeal underscored the significance of resilience and the necessity of advocating for oneself. As I embarked on building anew, I did so empowered, with a heart open to the future. A year had passed since the upheaval began, and my journey of self-reinvention progressed, each day uncovering new strengths and insights. The collapse of John and Ariana's world was not my ultimate goal, but an incidental result of my quest for dignity and fairness. On a bright autumn afternoon, as I sat in the comfort of my living room bathed in sunlight, I pondered the transformations in my life. My reflections were interrupted by a call from Elias, his voice alive with excitement. "Mom, Lila and I are getting married, and we want you to help us plan it," he announced. Joy overwhelmed me. "That's fantastic news, Elias." "I'd be delighted to help," I responded. Our conversation, filled with laughter and plans, was a vivid departure from the sorrow-laden discussions of the past. A few days later, during my regular walk, I crossed paths with Ariana. She appeared reduced, a shadow of her former self. Our eyes met, and I detected a hint of regret, perhaps a moment of realization in her gaze. "Stella," she began, her voice trembling. I must admit, I was caught off guard by the unexpected apology coming in so late. It was in that moment, standing there with Ariana left by herself, that I truly understood the change within me. Gone were the feelings of anger and the desire for revenge. Instead, I found myself looking forward to the joyous wedding preparations with Elias and Lila. Being engulfed in such love and hope, I fully embraced the essence of moving forward. The wedding day was nothing short of magical, a celebration brimming with laughter and happy tears. Watching Elias and Lila so deeply in love filled me with a profound sense of achievement. We had weathered the storms and come out stronger. In my toast, I spoke of how life's challenges shape us, and today, we were gathered to honor love, resilience, and new beginnings. As the night wound down, I took in the joyous expressions around me, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. I had not just made it through, I had flourished. In time, John and Ariana became mere echoes of the past. Rumors reached me of their departure, each grappling with their own struggles. My life, once overshadowed, was now truly my own. I found satisfaction in my career, happiness in being a mother and a friend, and solace in my moments of solitude. Sitting in my garden one sunny day, watching the flowers bloom, I felt the full weight of freedom. My path had been strewn with hurdles, yet it led me to a place of contentment and inner strength. The end of my marriage marked not an end, but the start of a new chapter. In this chapter, I was in control, crafting my own narrative. It was here that I discovered true happiness, peace, and a sense of self that was unassailable.